Belonging in Australia is important to me as a First Nation woman. It's really important to feel that I have a place, you know, where I do belong and I'm part of the community. BSL have been really good because I have a daughter with a disability. You know, they've been really supportive to the family and her. She found employment at the start of the year. Having someone to speak to when she needs to, and the same with me, it's having that outreach that, you know, you can rely on to have someone to speak to.
Belonging to me is walking into an environment where I'm valued, respected, I'm heard in my opinions, and that I have a voice. That really is encompassing of our values.
Belonging to the Australia means you should feel welcome, a part of the community, and you should have that sense that, yes, I am belonging to this community. BSL is doing to make feel belong to the community is when you go to each office, you see people from every culture is there. So someone from a different culture walk in and they see people from their own culture is there, so they feel more welcome and belonging to the community.
I came from a background of living in the bush for the last 20, 30 years, mostly on my own. And I found it amazing, the inclusion here. Not just the staff, but residents as well, of all sorts. And I've been amazed. I've actually enjoyed it. From going from a hermit to being a social animal again. Quite strange. And it makes me feel good. Yeah, I feel happy.
Belonging in Australia to me means embracing the parts of us that make us unique, and embracing and celebrating the story and the journey which shapes us.
It's really important for people to feel like they're part of a community, like they belong to something. It gives them a chance to feel included, to feel special, gives them a sense of purpose. Our stores provide an opportunity for volunteers and staff to come together. They form a community of their own. They make friendships, it gives them a sense of purpose, a sense of direction, feel like they're giving back to the community as well as forming friendships and great relationships.
When I was home alone, and I was 88 at the time, I suddenly felt very ill, depressed, did not quite know what to do about it. Where I feel there's nurses on call and staff there to support me and help me. If I feel depressed, they come and talk to me. And whereas I would not have had that living at home, as you may know.
Belonging in Australia to me has other words that go with it that I think are really important. And I think those words are welcoming and invitation. And without them, I don't think that we can belong. I think that we have to be open to others joining us and looking to the ways in which they feel they belong because they've been invited, because they've been welcomed in.
When we care and we feel like we belong, we have a society where everyone can thrive.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the 2025 Sambell Oration. My name is Matilda, my pronouns are she, her, and I'm very pleased to be here tonight as one of your MCs. For a visual description, I'm wearing a beautiful green dress with some wooden bangles and a blue flower brooch that I got from the BSL op shop. I am Caucasian with short dark curls.
And my name is Atena. I also use she, her pronouns. For a visual description, I'm currently wearing a black suit with some black trousers. I've got some pink decorative flowers all across my suit that I glued on at like 1 a.m. last night. I'm also wearing a pink tie and a lot of rings that I also got from BSL op shop. I am Middle Eastern and I've got long black curly hair, which is straightened tonight. And we are both so incredibly happy and excited to have you all here for BSL's annual signature event. and we're even more excited to be your MCs tonight.
So we'd like to introduce you all to an inspiring Wurundjeri elder who is going to welcome us to country. He did have a beautiful smoking ceremony on the way in, but please join me in putting your hands together for Uncle Bill Nicholson.
Can you take this off now?
Thank you for your very kind introduction. It means a lot to me because you know it's based on respect, and the hard workers I'd like to also say thank you to for creating this event for everyone here tonight. To allow me to take a bit of your time. Yes, we did the smoking ceremony earlier, but also to take a bit of time here to give you a little bit of a background of what a welcome to country is and actually who we are as the traditional custodians of this land. It also shows a great understanding that this particular, well now it's a speech I guess, but traditionally it was a ceremonial process that allowed people to feel culturally safe while they were visiting us. And we call that Tandaramnaji in our language. And that respect and understanding is a real key to feeling truly welcome, which I'll touch on shortly. Wiminjika, Gabamalamangil, Balambunyanabul. Welcome and greetings and good day from the Wurundjeri people. We're the mob of the Birrarung. We're the community of the Yarra, just down the river a little bit, about 190 years ago. A fella named John Wedge wrote down the name of the river as Yarra. He got that wrong, but it kind of stuck. Birrarung Ma, the sacred riverbanks of the Misty River, which we have been caring for thousands of years, and we still do to this day, as part of our cultural inheritance handed down from our ancestors. And a couple of elders in particular from the past that are a great inspiration to myself. And if you've never heard the Wurundjeri story before, which generally people around my vintage or even the older generations didn't get much of a chance, including myself, as it wasn't really incorporated in the education systems. I had to learn it outside of the school systems, to be honest. And these two particular individuals, a man named Simon Wonga, some of you might have heard of Wonga Park, a little bit further up the river towards Warrandyte there. Simon was the son of a steam Nuttingita, or spokesperson, a man named Billabulleri, he was the man in charge of this place that we are meeting on today when John Batman arrived on our land. And his predecessor, William Barrack. For those that don't know, Barrack's face is on a 30-odd storey building up the end of Swanston Street there, which was designed to symbolise him looking down to our sacred river. Barrack fought for equality of not just his own people, but for Aboriginal people in general, in an environment that we did not enjoy, and the attitudes of the day did not allow. So I acknowledge my elders past for their strength, resilience and wisdom that allows us to be here, and are amazing footsteps to follow. I'd also like to acknowledge the fallen clans that are no longer with us. There's many of them, and it's a very sad statement, yes, but part of our truth-telling can be sad at times, but it needs to be told so we don't forget these things. And I'd like to acknowledge the men, women and children that cared for the land that do not have family descendants here to this day. I'd like to extend my acknowledgements to community leaders here generally, from any cultural identity, of any age. Community leaders who are very humble in their actions and decision making are very closely linked to how traditional leadership was. And in turn, your community looks after you and respects you through your actions. Environmental leaders here today, the health of the land very much relates to the health of us. That's been a cultural law for thousands of years. Something that I really always like to acknowledge people who get that and understand and put actions into caring for this land with us, because it's our present health and our future health as well. And also cultural leaders here today of any cultural identity. Stand proud in who you are and your identity, whatever that may be. Teach it to your kids to stand proud. We are very multicultural now in Wurundjeri country, and to me that's a great thing if we learn to listen to one another and not be in fear, because unfortunately fear of diversity is the basis of racial attitudes which we don't want to see on Wurundjeri land anymore. We're a very sustainable, very wise, very inclusive, very healthy and very responsible culture. I'd like to extend that to everyone here. Let's try our best to care for country, as I mentioned, and respect one another and look after one another. That was part of the cultural law on this land for generations and still is. The past was tough. I'll use the word brutal. It was. Wonga was in charge of only less than 24 people in 1863. I would like to send a message from the past that let's try our very best to learn from it. If we are moving forward as a community, we must sometimes look at mistakes and never let them happen again. The Welcome to Country ceremony, I won't go into the meanings of it, we've already conducted the smoking ceremony, but to feel truly welcome to this land from Wurundjeri law, which was never ceded, respect of the land, people and culture is part of that law, and I feel that respect from the Brotherhood here tonight, because you've had me twice now, so two times respect. So thank you for that. We say Nun Gudjun, and I'd like to say Waminjika Wurundjeri Bik, welcome Wurundjeri country to you all, and you have a great night. So Nun Gudjun, thank you.
Thank you so very much, Uncle Bill, for that incredible welcome to country. I, like many others here tonight, would also like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which we gather on today. I would like to pay my full respects to elders past, present, future and emerging, as well as the many First Nations people that are in this room here with us tonight. We would also like to thank our generous sponsors of tonight's evening, as without their continuous and ongoing support, this entire event could not be possible. In particular, I would like to thank our principal sponsor, ANZ Bank, our signature sponsor, Interactive, and our key sponsor, Hester, for bringing us all together to celebrate this incredible event. So thank you very much. And now we would like to share a little bit about ourselves and how we actually got connected to BSL.
So since 2022, I've been connected to the National Youth Employment Body, also known as NYEB. For those who don't know, BSL love their acronyms. This is where I had the privilege of meeting Her Excellency when she was the chair of the NYEB, and I also had an incredible privilege to go to Canberra for the first time and attend her swearing-in ceremony. This is someone who is truly invested in having young people at the table during discussions that directly affect us. I'm also honoured to acknowledge that the current co-chair of the NYEB, Richard Yadzenga, is in the room with us tonight, just here. Now, I've had many roles and have particularly enjoyed chairing the Community Investment Committee in Warrnambool. This is where I was able to take leadership and bring youth voice to the table and articulate lived experience across many different levels. This year I was able to travel and was proud to take part of the National Leadership Forum in Canberra, as well as attending Youth Parliament recently.
It's funny, because both Matilda and I have been a part of Youth Parliament, and we actually had no idea until we met. So that was just, a small world. I actually got connected to BSL when I was 17 years old. My mum came home one day and she told me that there is a free barista course that is being offered by the BSL office in Broadmeadows, where she was actually attending an employment pathway program. 2 years later, I became a participant. A year later, I became a youth advisor. And now 4 years later, I am a senior youth advisor in that very same office. The butterfly effect is crazy. I am also the operations manager at our family restaurant, and I'm also the youngest national ambassador with Refugee Council of Australia. And now I would like you all to join me in welcoming BSL's board chair, Stephen Newton, AO, to say a few words while he will be welcoming our very special guest here on stage with us. Please welcome Stephen to the stage.
Thank you, Matilda, and thank you, Atena. I too acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land we are gathered on, pay my respect to elders past and present, and extend that respect to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people here this evening, including many colleagues from across the BSL community. Thank you, Uncle Bill, for your powerful welcome to country. For my visual description, I am tall, with grey hair, wearing a grey suit, a white shirt, a navy blue tie with red and white flecks through it. We have many special guests here this evening, and not least, of course, our orator, the Governor-General of Australia, who I will introduce shortly. Indeed, let me say that each and every one of you here tonight is indeed a distinguished guest for us. Whether you are a member of the board, a Charter and Life member, a supporter, a partner from the philanthropic or corporate sector, a lived experience advocate, a BSL service participant, a collaborator from the broader community sector, or a BSL staff member or volunteer, you are all part of the BSL community. Thank you all for being here. We want to see the various networks of care that we with you create flourish everywhere, so that everyone in this country can lead the lives they aspire to, and where they can feel a genuine sense of belonging. It is this spirit that has guided BSL since we were founded 95 years ago by pioneering Anglican clergy Gerard Tucker, Guy Coleman Cox, and Michael Clark, whose vision for a fair Australia continues to reverberate in our work today. With courage, with tenacity, they lived alongside those who were struggling, challenged those who were privileged, and found solutions where others saw problems. I too wish to acknowledge now and thank ANZ as the primary sponsor of the oration this evening, together with our other sponsors, as you have heard, Interactive and Hester. Can I also say it is a particular pleasure to have Jane Hodder here with us this evening. Jane is the BSL board chair-elect, and I will pass the baton to Jane after our annual general meeting in November. Beginning in 1981, the Sambell Oration has become a long-standing tradition at BSL, named after one of BSL's former executive directors and later Archbishop of Perth, Geoffrey Sambell, a person known for his concern and deep engagement with the social issues of his time. Attended now by leaders of the community, business and government, the Sambell Oration provides an opportunity to discuss the critical social issues of our time. It has featured a wide range of Australian and international guest speakers addressing indeed topics of social justice. In recent years, we have heard from Auntie Pat Anderson and Professor Megan Davis, the Treasurer of Australia, the Honourable Jim Chalmers, and Oxford Professor Sabina Alkar. Tonight, I am delighted to welcome our orator for the 2025 Sambell Oration, Her Excellency, the Honourable Ms. Sam Mostyn AC, Governor-General of Australia. Sam Mostyn AC was sworn in as Australia's 28th Governor-General on the 1st of July 2024. A businesswoman and community leader, Ms Mostyn is known for her exceptional service to the Australian community. She has a long history in executive and governance roles across diverse sectors, including business, sport, climate change, the arts, policy and not-for-profit. In 2024, Ms Mostyn was appointed a Companion of the Order of Australia for eminent service in the social justice, gender equity, sporting, cultural and business sectors, to reconciliation and to environment, sustainability. She had previously been appointed an Officer of the Order in 2021. Her Excellency has a deep connection with BSL. Ms Mostyn was the Chair of the National Youth Employment Body from its establishment in 2018 until she was called to higher duties in 2024. In this role, she championed policy, advocacy and systemic change efforts to fight youth unemployment in Australia. Her Excellency knows all too well that everyone in Australia deserves to live free of poverty and the critical relationship that care plays in creating a society where we can all belong and thrive. In her swearing-in speech in July 2024, Her Excellency spoke of her desire to visit places overlooked and to learn of the courage, imagination and care for our community across Australia. In doing so, she referred to one of her predecessors, Sir Ninian Stephen, his description of the Governor-General's role. And I quote, this is how he described it: depicting a nation to her people. Her Excellency spoke too of her aspiration for, and again I quote, an unstinting focus on kindness, on care and on respect. And as it happens, not long after I became a young school principal many years ago, I was fortunate to host Sir Ninian and Lady Stephen in country Victoria. How fitting now, as I come to the end of my time as BSL Board Chair, that we are able to host a Governor-General who is depicting Australia to its people, as Ninian Stephen had suggested, in the most modern, optimistic, contemporary and caring way. It is my very great pleasure now to welcome Her Excellency Sam Mostyn to deliver the 2025 Sambell Oration, Belonging in Australia. Please join me in welcoming Her Excellency to the stage.
I'm just getting over that extraordinary introduction. I feel completely humbled by that. Thank you, Stephen. That was beyond kind. Thank you so much. And good evening, everyone. I want to first thank Matilda and Atena for their wonderful emceeing of tonight. Where are they sitting when they're not here? Where are they? There they are. There they are. Matilda, I want to thank you for letting people know that you were in the Senate chamber on the day I was sworn in. I wanted to make sure on that day, and I guess it's referable to the topic tonight of belonging, that as many people could be sitting in the public gallery of the Senate when I was sworn in, particularly those who had either never been into our parliamentary chambers or had never been invited to Canberra for significant celebrations and ceremonies. I wanted the people that I would speak about in that speech, the people I wanted to care about during the course of my time as your Governor-General, to bear witness to that, but also to know that they belonged and they mattered. And you've heard from Matilda tonight why that is the case, why that is so important. And for Atena, for your work, for you now to be the young woman you are with your accomplishments, between the two of you, it fills my heart with just such pride to know that young women like you, young people like you, are going to lead our nation and do care deeply about what it means to belong. And as you have done, I will give a visual description of who I am tonight. I stand at about 5'11", a little bit more with heels. I've just turned 60, so I have grey hair. I have black rimmed glasses. The most important thing, though, about what you'll notice about me tonight is my shirt. I've worn it very specially. This shirt is a shirt from the Social Outfit. I wore a suit, as Matilda may know, that was designed and made by the Social Outfit for my swearing-in ceremony. The Social Outfit is a registered charity in New South Wales that operates a work integration social enterprise where their mission is to support refugee women to kickstart their Australian careers via their manufacturing studio and a retail clothing store. They had never made a suit before, and I thought it was appropriate that I encourage them to design a suit. They now have a suit line at the Social Outfit, and I encourage all women who like to wear a good suit to look at the Social Outfit. But what I'm wearing with my shirt is the annual print that is created by the women, the refugee and migrant women at the heart of the Social Outfit. It's an act of belonging on their behalf because all of the other fabrics that the Social Outfit uses come from other fashion houses. They don't buy any other fabric, they use dead stock fabric, so they're also sustainable. And so sustainable, ethical, taking care of those who've recently arrived and giving them a career. But once a year, the team at the Social Outfit speak to a group of the women who have come from all over the world, and they create the community print. And I'm wearing the 2025 community print, and it's the Dia print because it features large-scale floral artwork. I'm now back with my verbal description. Each petal is painted by a woman from the Chester Hill Community Hub in Sydney, representing cultural backgrounds from Pakistan, Egypt, Colombia, Macedonia, Lebanon, and Thailand. Now, Dia means light, a symbol of new beginnings, and one of the two prints that they have decided is the community print for this year. I wear it as an act of solidarity with a social enterprise that supports those who have just recently arrived and teaching skills, just as we wanted to do at the National Youth Employment Body, to support those to get the skills they would need to reach their potential. And I also wear it because underneath all these glorious floral patterns is a very simple idea that the women would paint their story into the shirt. And so I'm wearing their stories tonight to let them know that they belong just as they've always meant to have belonged. But when the Governor-General wears a shirt and says that they belong, I know that matters. And I'll speak more about that during my remarks. I also want to thank Uncle Bill Nicholson. Uncle Bill, I don't know if you're still here with us or not, but I wanted to acknowledge Uncle Bill and the Wurundjeri people, the traditional owners of this wonderful land that we're on. I want to pay respects to their elders past and present. I want to acknowledge all First Nations people in the audience, and there are many. It's wonderful to see so many friends here, and I will say more about welcomes in a moment as part of respect and belonging. Thank you, Stephen. I just wanted to thank you for having me here and the work that you have done as chair of BSL so kindly, so professionally and so generously, and to congratulate you on the work to bring in your incoming chair, Jane Hodder. It says a lot when you can build an organisation and guarantee its success by choosing successors of such great quality. So in saying that, I also want to congratulate your incoming chair, Jane Hodder, all of your board members for all of the exceptional work that leads the Brotherhood of St Laurence with such great grace, but great governance, so important. I really want to acknowledge my dear friend Travers McLeod. We've known each other a very long time. He's the Executive Director. He would be known, I think, to almost everyone in this room tonight. And in doing so, I also acknowledge your team, Trav, because I know what it means to be a leader of a team, and everyone involved in BSL, including those who are recipients of BSL's programs, the volunteers, everyone involved in the Brotherhood of St Laurence I want to acknowledge. Dr Tony Warren of ANZ, I also want to acknowledge. You always need a sponsor for things to happen, and it's important that we acknowledge ANZ stepping up and supporting the Brotherhood of St Laurence. There are a number of my friends in the audience. I realise if I started to name you, I'd get into trouble. So I can see John Thwaite sitting right in front of me though. And I acknowledge John because we did many, many things together involving belonging, sustainability, climate change. And as a former leader of this state, I'd love to acknowledge you, but there are so many people in this room I would acknowledge if time permitted. I really want to thank the Brotherhood for inviting me to give this year's Sambell Oration on belonging in Australia. I want to thank the Brotherhood in its entirety for your dedication and care every single day, striving for an Australia without poverty. Now I want to return to Uncle Bill Nicholson's welcome. I always believe that the act of welcome from a First Nations elder is in itself a significant act of both care and belonging, of great kindness. At Government House in Canberra, and we also do this at Admiralty House in Sydney, but in Canberra it's the welcomes from the Ngunnawal elders that are now one of the most important features of how we represent belonging in our ceremonial events, and they are all very important ceremonial events. An example, the credentialing of our new ambassadors and high commissioners. They're very special events to welcome someone that represents another nation in this country. The representatives of those nations are often only just arriving in Australia. They've been in Canberra for just a few days and they come to Government House to present their credentials to me, upon which I then declare them to be their country's representatives. And because I've only been in Australia a few days, we decided that we would encourage a welcome ceremony that would mean the first thing that they would learn about welcomes in Australia was that they came from First Nations elders. So for many of them, it was the first time that they will walk through smoke and enter a house smelling of eucalyptus. They're welcomed with such generosity and understanding of the deep history of our country. It's always wonderful to see. It's always a topic of conversation after the credentialing ceremonies. Most recently, though, I have also seen the impact of these welcomes at citizenship ceremonies, which I also now have the great honour of presiding at, along with many others around the country who know what it is like to officially bring someone in as an Australian citizen. It's a spine-tingling moment. But those ceremonies remind me of the kindness and care manifested in a First Nations welcome. And our newest citizens are always actively engaged in that moment with the oldest continuous culture on the planet. It's a very special moment to witness. If you go to citizenship ceremonies, I'd encourage you to take that moment because it's a pin drop moment. Our newest citizens always pay deep attention because they know in receiving it, they know what the impact is. They're being told that they belong, despite starting in some other country, on some other land, and however they came here, in that moment, they belong. And I want to start by sharing a story that's connected to this. Since becoming your Governor-General, I've wanted to ensure that the official residences, the places where I get to stay, I say I stay overnight and sleep there. I don't say they're my homes, they're the homes and the houses for all Australians. But I wanted to make sure that the official residences themselves are places that welcome in a way that indicate that all belong in those places. They've often been places behind gates that have felt full of privilege where not many people do belong. And I believe that all Australians belong and can come to these great houses. So what do? We've changed the art. We've consulted with the National Gallery of Australia, the Portrait Gallery, the War Memorial. And if I tell you about a change in Admiralty House, it now has at the entrance a very important Aboriginal men's painting, Paddy Bedford's Men's Medicine Pocket. Now, Paddy Bedford was the favourite artist of Sir William Dean. And Sir William Dean, who's still alive, collected a lot of Paddy Bedford's work. Of course, Paddy Bedford is no longer alive, but the men's medicine pocket sitting at the front of Admiralty House in Kirribilli in Sydney says something very distinct, not just to Aboriginal people and Torres Strait Islanders arriving, but to everyone arriving. that the place of that painting belongs in the entrance hall at Admiralty House, the home of admirals traditionally. In the official study at Admiralty House is a magnificent painting by another great Indigenous artist, Sally Gabori. It sits alongside many paintings and artefacts which we've placed in both Government House and Admiralty House. But last January, while we were hosting an event for the University of New South Wales for young Indigenous engineering students at Admiralty House, I went looking for one of the participants as they were wandering around the house, because we encourage everyone to walk around the houses, take photos, look at the art, ask questions, and everything is labelled, the provenance of everything is there so people can learn. But I discovered that one of the participants had left the room, a young Indigenous engineering student. And I found him standing in front of the Sally Gabori painting in the official study all by himself. He was quite tearful and he was staring deeply into the Sally Gabori painting. Now, Sally Gabori, of course, is a master painter, again, no longer with us, but from Mornington Island, near the top of Australia. And I went over to him and asked him how he was doing, and he said, "I'm okay." I said, "I think you're a bit teary." And he said, "I'm just looking at this painting." I said, what matters about the painting? And he said, "Well, Auntie Sally painted with my grandmother, and they were great friends, and I know this work, and I knew it as soon as I walked into your study. And I'm wondering whether I can ask you to get a photo, because I have to show my mum when I go back to Mornington Island that Sally Gabori is in the house of the Governor-General in Admiralty House." And of course we took a selfie, we had a long conversation, and I said, "Tell me what it means beyond the painting and beyond your relationship with Sally as someone connected to you and your grandmother." And he was quite matter of fact. He said, "I never thought someone like me from so far away, from a remote community, would belong here. And here I am, here's my country in your study." He felt like he belonged. And that's the point of what we're trying to do with the official residences, as an act of encouraging everyone to know they belong. It's not just Indigenous paintings. We have put up many different paintings from different theatres of war, from the War Memorial, that celebrate all sorts of service. We've put up paintings of people with Chinese and Asian heritage, faces that have never been seen on the walls of these houses before, to try to tell a story that everyone does belong. And over time, I hope that anyone that walks in would find something of their story, something of their history on the walls or the artefacts around these magnificent homes. A few weeks later, we had the 50th anniversary party for SBS in the same building, and we were in the same room. And Rhoda Roberts, a wonderful Aboriginal leader in the cultural area and on the board of SBS, came over to me and she said, "How come you've got a Mornington Island painting in your study?" And I told her a bit of the story, and she said, "Did you know that when across the way from Admiralty House, as you look across to the Sydney Opera House, because of course that view is spectacular and looks straight across at the Sydney Opera House, the first performance that was conducted in the Sydney Opera House in 1973 was from the Mornington Island Aboriginal dances." She said, "I thought that's why you had it there, looking over at the Sydney Opera House to say you knew that had happened." Of course, I hadn't known that happened. But when you open up a story about who belongs, many other stories flood out. And I hope that continues to be the case. And I do hope that when you all come and visit, and everyone is invited when you come to Sydney and to Canberra, that you find your story there, or you're encouraged to ask us to find a story or promote a story that we can find in art or artefacts. Now tonight, it's an absolute privilege for me to follow in the footsteps of the previous Sambell orators. Their words, their ideas and reflections have always inspired me. I follow them online, I'll read them after the event if I haven't been able to come. You've mentioned some of them already, Stephen. Last year's orator, Professor Sabina Alkir, powerfully invited us to measure poverty in a multi-dimensional way, so that poverty could be visible in ways that could be linked to action. Care in action, not just care as a thought. Poverty could be visible in ways that can be linked to action. And I think one of my other predecessors, Sir William Dean, as I've already mentioned, he described that as holding compassion at the core of the work. That's what he told me to do when I met him before I was sworn in. You mentioned Treasurer Jim Chalmers, who joined the year before. He reminded us that hard-headed economics doesn't have to conflict with compassion. There's that word again. And in 2022, Auntie Pat Anderson, AO, and Professor Megan Davis, now AC, gave a remarkable talk about the antecedents of the mighty Uluru Statement from the Heart. Now, just recently, it was a particular delight for me to invest Professor Davis and another former orator from a bit further back in 2011, where she presented, Jennifer Westacott, with their insignia of the Order of the Companion of the Order of Australia, the AC. And it was with great delight that I was able to invest them with their insignia. So 2 of your former orators are now holding the AC, the highest civilian honour in this country. It says so much about the people you invite and where they go on next. Of course, I want to pay tribute to Geoffrey Sambell. You've already heard about his life of service, whether it was in uniform during the Second World War, in the church, and to social services policy and delivery. His work was always and remains an example of deep care for others. For me, he epitomised the very essence of ensuring that everyone has a right to belong. So our theme of belonging tonight, reflected in the video that we saw before we sat down, is actually something I think about every day. And as you've heard, and I've gone about it a lot, about being sworn in and committing to you all, committing to the country, that I would put care, kindness and respect at the core of everything that I will do during my term. I always say this because I repeat what I said in the Senate, but I say this wherever I go so we understand what that care means. It's care for one another, care for those who care for others, care for our extraordinary continent and its environmental beauty and the riches it has always given us, care for civics and institutions, and care for the way in which we discuss and debate the issues of our time without judgment, anger or violence. Something I've reflected on a lot in the year that we've just had. And the Prime Minister, in asking me to serve as your Governor-General, he asked me very specifically to be modern, visible and optimistic. So I spend a great deal of time thinking, working with my team, talking to people all over the country, wherever I can, about the intersection of care, kindness, modernity, optimism and visibility, as well as respect. And it's in that intersection, I believe, we find belonging. What it really means when we speak of what it means to belong in Australia, and what it would mean if we were all to care deeply and actively about belonging. Everything that I've now seen and done in the last 14 months has done nothing but reaffirm my belief that care and kindness has the deepest and resonant place in our Australian identity, our society, our communities, and even our economy. And wherever I travel, people like me talking about care, kindness and respect, but interestingly, the word they always pull out that they want to hear more of is kindness. It's the one they most ask me to elevate. There's something in that about the time we live in that people do, seek more kindness, for people to be kind and talk about kindness as a strength. Earlier this year, you may know about this, but Professor Tim Jackson, someone I served on a sustainability committee for many years, Professor Tim Jackson, an ecological economist at the University of Surrey, published The Care Economy. I highly, highly recommend it. He argues that care is the first principle of human society on which everything else is built. Where traditional economists talked about the invisible hand, Adam Smith and others, the care economy, he says, recognises the invisible heart, the vital work of care that's at the centre of all of our lives in the community. So this is not so much about putting care at the centre as it is him recognising and hoping that we will see that care is already there. And I want to quote from what he says about care. He says he wants to argue in the book that our job is not to delve into specific sectors of the economy which we happen to label with the word care. He says the care economy is not a standalone sector. It isn't some desirable cherry on the top of the economic cake. I'm saying something different here. I'm saying this because prosperity is primarily about health. The economy should always and everywhere be about care. In talking about their care economy, I'm talking about economy as care. That's my case. And he makes that case brilliantly through a very personal set of stories in the book. But he draws on people I know that you all know, people like Joan Tronto, the author of The Caring Democracy and Who Cares. And she describes care as a species of activity that includes everything we do to maintain, contain and repair our world so that we can live in it as well as possible. That would include our bodies, ourselves and our environment. It's everything. That's care for me. That's the care when we think about putting care at the centre. As Tim says, it's already there. That's what I see in the Brotherhood of St Laurence. That's the work of BSL. That's the work of Geoffrey Sambell and everyone who has come since. Now, the rare privilege that I have as your Governor-General, there are many, but the rarest of all, I think, is that the office and the travel I have gives me, as it did for my predecessors, both a panoramic view of our society and the opportunity to regularly experience the very fine grain of communities. You've quoted St Ninian's Stephen, and I'd like to quote another of my predecessors, Sir Zelman Cowen. He similarly spoke of the role of the Governor-General. He described it as reflecting the light and shade of the country back to itself, which is also an exercise I'm engaged with. Others have said to me that the job is to interpret the mood and the current tone of the country back to Australians. Today, and through the lens of modernity, as requested by the Prime Minister, I think there's an additional focus required. It's to amplify, share and reflect the values, lessons and insights, not just to comment on them or place them for others to think about. It's to inform and educate about our democracy and our institutions, to help to build trust and engagement in our citizens by inviting and welcoming everyone into the work of the Governor-General, the Office of the Governor-General, modelling the behaviours and showcasing the values of care, kindness and respect in absolutely everything that we do, to ensure that all Australians not only see themselves within our mighty democracy, but know profoundly that they do belong, and that their care for our institutions, as I said in those words about what we care about, is as vital as anything. And as you all know, the times we now live in demand our engagement and care about all of those aspects. Data sadly confirms that Australians' understanding and appreciation of our democracy and civics is in fairly parlous state. I've arrived into an office where not many people actually know the office exists, where trust in institutions have declined, and you all know dis and misinformation are ever present. A malevolent force which has the potential to destabilise and actively undermine our democracy. And we see it in developments around the world. We know how precious our democracy is and how important it is that we nurture, renew and care for it. I see it when I'm travelling overseas. It's often important for me to reflect back to Australia how we are seen by others. Everywhere I've travelled in the last 12 months, Singapore, Sri Lanka, Japan, Turkey, I've been to Egypt, I've most recently been to Mongolia and Vietnam. In all of those places, I can't tell you how people race up to tell me about how much they admire our democracy, our values, Australia. It's always spoken about. Most recently, it was spoken about in Mongolia, a place I'd encourage you all to engage with and visit. It's a fascinating place, sitting precariously between two enormous neighbours, China and Russia. It's a democracy, a fledgling democracy, almost 35 years old. And one of the ideas for its democratic institutions and the education of its cabinet came from Gareth Evans, our former Foreign Minister, who, with a former Foreign Minister of Mongolia over 35 years ago, on the back of a serviette, wrote a plan for the Australian Awards, a Colombo plan type plan for Mongolians, smart young Mongolians. For over 35 years have been coming to Australian universities, and today over half the Mongolian cabinet were trained in Australia about democracy in English, and they call themselves the Mozzies. When I arrived, they said, we need to talk about the Mozzies. And I think I turned to the ADC travelling with them and said, have we got some repellent? It's true. And they said, no, we're talking about the Mongolian Aussies, who I subsequently met, over 180 of them at the time, playing enormous roles right across the Mongolian economy and society. They need us to keep reforming and investing in our democracy, to know that the one they believe in is thriving and strong because they believe in us. I hear similar things all over the world, and I often want to say to people who say things aren't great here, or we've had the biggest division in our communities of all times, to say it's just not true. And you need to go outside our country and listen to those that observe us and know just how precious our democracy is. And so today I'm even more convinced now than I was when I stood in the Senate over a year ago that it's care, kindness and respect that's at the core of who we are. And it does underpin our ability to remain strong and a very successful country. I also said at the time in that speech that care is the quieter, better part of ourselves. And I still believe that. But having travelled around this country twice, been to every state and territory twice, visited the places I promised that didn't often get a visit, and spoken and listened to thousands and thousands of Australians, I've been treating the community as my new teacher. And now I believe, through them, that care can't always be the quiet part. That part that we often leave unspoken or ignored or assumed or garner it with humility. Care is, in fact, as everyone at BSL knows, I think, it's hard. It's got to be rigorous. It takes effort and commitment. It's strategic, and when it's embraced and done well, it delivers so much better in the way of outcomes, regardless of the policy area, but as much as in economic and security decisions as it does in health and social security and the alleviation of poverty and exclusion. Care is at the core of our modern Australia, where everyone should belong, but we need to treat it seriously and understand how hard that is to do. Early on, I also borrowed from Noel Pearson's three-part view of Australia's unique story. I call it a braided story now because I think it's in the braiding of the three that we gather our strength. The story that begins with 65,000 years of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander history and culture, joined by the democratic ideals that underpin our civics and institutions, derived from the British but also uniquely Australian, including the Office of the Governor-General. And then completed, or in the course of being completed today, our remarkable multiculturalism, where more than 7.5 million people have migrated to Australia since the Second World War. This year we marked 50 years since the arrival of the first refugees from Vietnam. And during my recent state visit to Vietnam, I reflected to the President and the other leaders that I met that I could not imagine modern Australia today without the immense contributions that generations of people from Vietnam have made to our nation. And of course that extends to all people who've come from so many other nations to help us be successful. And later this year, we're not exactly sure when, but it will be noteworthy, we will welcome our 1 millionth refugee. Whoever that person is, whoever they might be, wherever they've come from, they are part of this modern chapter. And they will be part of the story that's still being written. But I like to think of it now as describing us as modern Australia. And so it's in that context that I think about belonging. What would it feel like to belong in modern Australia? And I asked that question earlier today at Foundation House with Paris Aristotle, who I think is here tonight, somewhere in the room. There he is. Thank you for hosting us today, Paris. It was remarkable. I asked a very diverse group of people who work at Foundation House and who work with refugees and asylum seekers, as BSL does. I asked many of them who themselves had refugee backgrounds what it would mean to belong in modern Australia. And the answers that they returned were quite profound and so deeply honest. They reflected that belonging means feeling seen, feeling safe, and feeling like you can build the life you want to live, to have the capacity and capability to live the lives that you aspire to, including a deep commitment to want to contribute to Australia's success. For so many people who come here as migrants and refugees, finding freedom and safety is only the beginning. I meet them all over the country, no matter how long they've been here, they have only ever wanted to contribute as Australians to make Australia an even better place. They want to help others who are on the same journey. They all, like all of us in this room, want to contribute to our broader Australian project. In that sense, I think belonging means being engaged, to be purposeful. But they reminded me in that conversation that in order to do so, they need to know where to start, how to start when they first arrive. To be treated with respect and included in services and pathways, they need the architecture for developing and growing their personal capacity so they can share that with our community. Now, like Foundation House, the Brotherhood of St Laurence is an exemplar of this, and I've seen that over so many years, particularly through the work at the National Youth Employment Body, where we travelled the country, we met young people who wanted the same chance, a start, a trusted start with capacity and skills so they could reach their potential wherever they were from. And the NYEB work profoundly works. It's one of the great, it's one of the many, many successes of the Brotherhood. Now, in addition to being your Governor-General, I'm also, and in a difficult turn of events for my father, who served in the Australian Army for 40 years, and having had 4 daughters, never really believed that women should serve alongside servicemen at the front line in the Army, despite supporting us as feminists. I've turned up as also the Commander-in-Chief of the Australian Defence Force. Now, you will know, if you know anything about my office, that I don't actually command the Defence Force. That is the job of the Prime Minister, the Defence Minister and the Chief of the Defence and the Service Chiefs. That's kind of nice to go home and tell my dad that I'm the Commander-in-Chief. He's 91, I think it's getting a bit confusing. But he's very proud. But in that job, I meet regularly with the Service Chiefs, and our Chief of Defence is someone who very much understands the role that defence plays in our community and what it means to belong in the Defence Force. I've come to know and understand the modern ADF. I've learnt from countless discussions with serving women and men on bases around Australia and all over the world who do such a powerful work for us, and to discover that we are the only nation in the world that since 1947 has had peacekeepers in parts of the world every day. It's a wonderful thing that we should celebrate Australian peacekeepers somewhere in the world every day since 1947. Now, many of the conversations that we have would surprise you. Old school looking soldiers with chests full of medals suddenly open up and talk to me about the fact that they really want me to talk about deep acts of care and care for others. They want me to talk as a veteran's daughter, as a family member of a veteran. They talk with emotion about why they care. The care conversation comes up all the time in one of the toughest and rigorous of environments, our Defence Force. And I've sought his permission tonight because I've also learnt a lot from my most recent aide-de-camp. I have an aide-de-camp, an aide from the modern Defence Force from each of the services. I have 3 from Army, Air Force and Navy who served me for a year before they pass on and go and do extraordinary things in their careers. Most recently, Flight Lieutenant Danny Bunting joined us as my Air Force aide-de-camp, and he's here with me tonight. Danny is a nurse and a paramedic who arrived in Australia from Singapore as a young boy. He has served in the Victorian Ambulance Service. Before joining the ADF, he's been a forensic police officer in Victoria. He has been deployed overseas in London, helping Ukraine and Afghanistan. He also volunteers for the St John Ambulance, and last week at a St John cadet camp in Sydney, Danny introduced me to the crowd of 14 to 15-year-olds. They were 14 to 15-year-old Dannys, just like he was when he was young, turning up as teenagers to show how to help people, care for people and give themselves to others. Today, Danny joined me at Foundation House. He was asked by those same people that Paris brought together whether he felt like that he belonged. And I loved his response, and he's given me permission to tell you what he said. His answer was, as an Asian migrant, a gay man and a Muslim serving our country in the uniform of the Royal Australian Air Force, how could I not feel like I belong? Just think about what that says about modern defence. I want to thank Danny for letting me share that part of his life. He's also a remarkable ADC and takes very good care of me. Today we also visited and saw care in every form, whether it was the Peter Mac Cancer Centre, the work that's done at every level of care across this country and here in Victoria. They are actually the only health service, Peter Mac, in Australia that has social prescribers. It was the first time I'd really heard of a social prescriber. And these are those workers that sit in the wellness centre. They make prescriptions for connection, community and well-being for their patients that they now describe as more life-saving than the treatments they've had to stay well. This is the connection back into society, into a sense of belonging. And early this morning, I did visit the headquarters of Victoria Police. I'd spoken with Commissioner Mike Bush in the tragic days following the Paul shooting. And today was a chance to check in and offer support and care for the police. And they care deeply and they are in pain, having lost their members. And I saw that again at the Police Remembrance Day just a week ago in Canberra, because their role is also one of care. Now, I want to return to belonging in the context of citizenship, and please start eating your dinner because I think I'm going over time. But I now have that unique privilege I mentioned of presiding over citizenships in everywhere from the drawing room of Government House to town halls in the suburbs to the shores of Lake Burley Griffin on Australia Day and Sydney Harbour when required to the remote Northern Territory in Nhulunbuy. Each one has been uplifting and inspiring and filled with tender and powerful moments of family, friendships and, of course, belonging. I've observed two common traits in all these ceremonies. The one I've already shared with you is about the impact of the Welcome to Country. The second is our newest citizens' pride in our civics and our institutions, partly through the process of the challenging citizenship test, which I would encourage everyone who has not had to do it to do. You will discover that those who've done the test know more about our civics and our values and what it means to live by the rule of law in this country than you will, and you will get most of the questions wrong. It's a great thing to do. What I see, though, is having fronted up to become an Australian citizen, it's a conscious choice to belong to a country with participatory democracy, compulsory voting and a stable, responsible government. It's where they have an opportunity to contribute on equal footing. It's why they want to join us and become citizens of Australia. I saw this at the social outfit from where my shirt comes. I went there to see a couple of the workers in the workroom. I wanted to know what it felt like for them to belong at social outfit, but what it meant to belong in Australia. And at that day I met Sohelia. She had made a shirt that I had worn and she'd noticed it on our social media and she was so proud. That's why, as I said, I wear the social outfit. But Sohelia was wanting to tell me something desperately. She took me aside and she said that she told me about her story of arriving in Australia as a refugee from Afghanistan, having spent many years in Iran with her young daughter. And she told me how proud she was to become a citizen. And she had a face bursting with joy. And she said the best thing that had happened since becoming a citizen, because she'd raced to get her citizenship, was that she voted for the first time in her life in the most recent federal election. 2 weeks after she became a citizen, her happiest day was voting. She told me what it was like to stand there with her 14-year-old daughter and for her daughter to know that she too would vote in Australia and her voice would matter, that she'd be seen and heard, something that had never occurred in their lives. It's a joy I wish that all Australians could feel more deeply and not just be blasé about our voting, our compulsory preferential voting. If the future of Australia is reflected in the pride and joy I see in the faces of those taking citizenship and those I've spoken about and those who welcome them from First Nations, then I'm very optimistic about this country. Part of that comes back to care, of course, because it's the care I see in the communities at every voluntary organisation I'm a patron of, every place where Australians are striving for excellence in the arts and sciences, in education and communication, in defence and international relationships, and importantly in our civics and our democracy. It is the most basic mechanism of us all living together, and it's intrinsically linked to belonging. It's what joins us all, it's what brings us all here tonight. Care, in this sense, is something that Geoffrey Sambell would have recognised. The hallmark of his contribution across decades of social services leadership was care underpinned by accountability, good governance and sound management. He knew, and you all know, and I know, that care has to be sustainable and ethical, supported by the whole community. And you probably know that next week is National Carers Week. And as patron of Carers Australia, I'll be marking that with a roundtable discussion at Government House in Canberra. And the theme is, you are one, know one, or will be one. We will all be cared for, we will all care, and we all know carers. You might also add to that that you were cared for, and you are cared for. You may not just know it, and you'll continue to be cared for. So whether we acknowledge it or not, care and belonging is fundamental and ever present in our lives. Just recently I get a lot of mail, and I try to write back to everyone as best I can. I received a beautiful letter from a man who told me that as a carer for many of his family members, my promise to elevate care had resonated with him, and he said this: "Your speech gave voice to something many carers know in our bones, that care is not a private burden, but a public good. It's part of our national story." It's nice to be reminded by people who write to say care is part of our national story. He added that carers want to see care given moral weight, that social recognition of care is the quiet justice that carers work toward every day. I think considering care as a public good is appropriate, giving it moral weight, social recognition. It really speaks to an ethics of care, just as Joan Tronto said. And I was really happy in preparing for this oration to learn that parts of my swearing speech are now read by participants at the Crown Lana Centre for Ethical Leadership, alongside parts of moral philosopher Virginia Held's 2005 book, The Ethics of Care. In that book, she argues that our foundations for justice and ethics should recognise that as humans we are relational and interdependent. The view of people as rational, independent individuals flourishing on their own sounds noble, but it does not describe our lives. We do not thrive alone. And she says every person starts out as a child dependent on those providing us care, and we remain interdependent with others in thoroughly fundamental ways throughout our lives. Indeed, any one of us tonight, anyone in this country may become completely dependent again at any time. She also argues that while there can be care without justice, think about the way caring is distributed in families and societies and held often by women, there can be no justice without care, and that care is in fact the larger framework in which we can begin to think about justice, and I'd say belonging. I learnt that from Justice Michael Kirby when I worked for him as a young lawyer when he was president of the New South Wales Court of Appeal. He taught me that the law was not transactional either. He said to me it was grounded in something larger, something he simply called love. He saw failures of justice as failures of love and failures of empathy. He was dealing with people who did not feel like they belonged, who were left out. And I've been recently reflecting on that year because he's invited me to contribute a foreword to his new collection of speeches and articles spanning his 50-year career. But if you look at his career and the people he's cared for, it's always for people who otherwise would be on the margins. He makes them belong, and he infuses everything with his sense of love as the foundation of human rights. Just like Sir William Dean did when he elevated compassion and told me to put compassion at the centre of what I do. Love, compassion, care, kindness. To some, it can seem odd to bring them all into the public sphere. I suspect not in this room, though. They are in fact central to our lives as a community of people who belong together and together belong to this country, to this land, and to the planet. The final thing I just want to say is what I increasingly see as the issue of my time as your Governor-General, and it takes us back to that civics and democracy piece. 6 months into my term, I met with the head of ACARA, the Curriculum Authority, and when you learn that 72% of Australians don't know anything about our democracy, and that once kids get to the age of 15, less than 25% of them know anything about how our system works, that's a worry. That's an apathy and a lack of knowledge, despite everything I've said about what we could care about. So that's the modern piece of how I think about belonging. I'm using every tool at my disposal to lift the veil and explain and show what's behind the tradition, the convention and processes behind my constitutional and ceremonial duties. If you haven't jumped onto my Instagram feed, why? I'm being cheeky. We are using Instagram, Facebook, modern forms of communication, not for glamour, not for ego, to show and tell, to explain our modern democracy and everything that sits behind our constitutional arrangements, our parliamentary democracy, why we have the compulsory vote. And I'll keep doing it because the response has been positive. People are eager and hungry for more. And I think that reflects a fundamental truth and a reason for optimism. Most Australians know deep down that our democracy is something we should be proud of, but we've got to have a concerted, systematic effort to re-enliven it, to renew our commitment to democracy. Because we are facing, should we allow it to happen, a perfect storm where complacency about all that makes our democracy strong is meeting the modern maelstrom of dis and misinformation. I think if there was care for our institutions and democracy, then misinformation would remain on the fringes. It's creeping in because we don't have strength in our understanding of our democracy. Recent research shows that while our democracy is still well regarded, there are big indicators that we're in trouble and an investment of renewal is required. I would encourage you all to get a copy of the most recent McKinnon research into the renewing of our democracy. It tells you what's going wrong. It tells you how many people don't understand what is going on. But people actually do believe in a fair go. They want to believe in something. The two words that Australians use most often to describe our democracy, interestingly, and describing Australia are beautiful. I think that goes to our physical beauty of this nation, and the other is diverse. They're the two words most often used to describe Australia in the qualitative work that McKinnon has done. But they've discovered that there is a decreasing understanding of how you take that into understanding, and so few people understand. So read the McKinnon work, it's vital, but it does require us all to engage in a renewal of our democracy. Almost a fifth of Australians don't believe in compulsory voting, and more Australians today get their news from social media than traditional media. So there's the issue, there's the collision. For each of us, especially for those of us like me in public office and public positions, now's the time to think about what does this moment call for. And what it calls for is what I've been talking about throughout my long speech. It's care and belonging. It's guided me throughout this first year of my term. That quieter part of care, the better part of ourselves, I want to advocate that perhaps, as I said earlier, we must talk a lot about it, that we need to showcase, we need to exemplify. We need to acknowledge when behaviour, particularly online behaviour, is not kind or caring, when rancour, anger and abuse are rewarded and celebrated, to call out the fact that it must not. If we truly value care, kindness, respect, our democracy, we need to fight for all of this. We need to acknowledge that democracy requires active citizenship, and we need to support and enable that. So I've spoken with deep and genuine optimism, I hope, about what I've seen of the country in my first year as Governor-General, because it's in our democracy that's where Australians belong. Our democratic institutions belong to all Australians. That's where care and belonging can critically come together. Participation in our democracy, grounded in understanding, is itself a form of care, of stewardship. And we know that people who feel like they belong are more likely to participate and inform themselves and play a role in our democracy. And informed participation is the very effective way of cultivating belonging. Since our democratic institutions are the basis for our freedoms, our rights, our responsibilities and our connections, it now matters more than ever that people understand and feel ownership of them. It matters that all of us, all Australians, in all of our wonderful diversity, in the titanium strength of diversity that Jason Yetsan Lee calls it, that we share a sense of group investment in what keeps us united and makes us free and guarantees peace. So I remain optimistic. I hope to be a bit visible. I'll continue to be modern in the way I explain the role of the Governor-General, hoping to build understanding, showcasing both tradition and modernity, helping people engage with our democracy and feeling the greatest of pride in our modern Australia. And I can only do that if we all do that together. And I learnt those lessons early on through the Brotherhood of St Laurence, through the work that we've done in partnership with civil society always, that to belonging is to show up, it's to care about all the things that really matter to our future and make us truly mighty. We must care about poverty. We must care about our democracy. We've got to care about care, and we have to care about the way we conduct ourselves in the most difficult issues of our time and not descend into violence and hate and anger, but stick with love. Thank you, everybody.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Trav McLeod. I'm delighted in a moment to introduce a panel discussion which will follow Her Excellency's really significant oration about care and belonging and what that might mean for our democracy. The stories we open up, that invisible heart of our democracy, and how we can link kindness to action and a better Australia. Before I do, as the other speakers have done, I also want to acknowledge we're on the beautiful Wurundjeri land, pay my respects to elders past and present, and acknowledge First Nations colleagues who enrich the BSL community. And I also want to thank Uncle Bill Nicholson for the smoking ceremony earlier and the welcome to country. He's had another event across the road, so he's run back and forth tonight and done such a brilliant job. For my visual description, I'm 6 foot tall, just. With short brown hair, I'm wearing a blue suit, a white shirt, a blue and orange tie. Very sadly, my two daughters ruled out the brown leather jacket and pineapple Hawaiian shirt from BSL's op shops for tonight's attire. But it's now my great pleasure to ask Her Excellency to come back onto the stage and introduce 4 other guests to join her for a panel discussion following her oration. So first of all, we have Jo Evans. Jo is a single parent, educator and a formidable lived experience advocate from Seymour Investment. from Seymour in regional Victoria. Hey, Joe. Yep, that's great. Joe's graduated from our Sustaining Economic Empowerment and Dignity for Women program, the SEED program, which has created a lovely legacy in her local community. A network of women, brilliant women, looking out for each other and building beautiful lifelong friendships. Our second guest to join the speakers on stage is Nansi Khayat. Please come up, Nansi. Nansi is the City of Hume's representative on the National Youth Employment Body. She's a future paramedic. Nansi arrived in Australia from Jordan 4 years ago. And for anyone who's met Nansi, you won't forget her because she is full of sincerity and a genuine commitment to bringing people together. Next is a dear BSL colleague, Michael Parremore, who, come up Michael, where are you? So Michael is a senior local area coordinator in the North East metropolitan area within the City of Whittlesea and part of the BSL Disability Services team. Michael is part of the deaf community. He's also a brilliant cricketer. He's represented Australia and Victoria in deaf cricket and is the current coach of the Victorian deaf cricket team.
Thank you.
And the moderator of this panel will be our recently appointed Director of First Nations Strategy and Outcomes at BSL, Will Broughton. Where are you, Will? So Will is a proud Gungeri man with ties to the Wiradjuri people too. He joined us from the Victorian State Government, where he directed Koori employment, cultural and self-determination strategy within court services and within the justice system. So we're delighted to have Will with us on BSL's executive team. And you're in for a treat, and I will hand over to Will to get the panel underway.
Thank you, Trav. Is this working? Okay. All right. Thank you to our panellists. You all look amazing. So, hi. So before we get into the panel discussion, I do just want to acknowledge there has been a great deal of geopolitical turmoil abroad. Genuine fears for our diaspora communities. So whether they be Jewish, Palestinian, Ukrainian, or Sudanese, and that's about safety, acceptance, and respect. So at BSL, we are acutely aware of the impact this has had on our staff and the communities we engage with every day. Okay. And here at home, we must also recognise that injustice continues on our own soil, that First Nations people still live with the ongoing impacts of colonisation and inequity, reminding us that our commitment to justice begins here. All right. Now that that's out of the way, we'll go to Joe. So, Joe, I'd like to start with you. I better turn this way, a bit rude. You recently went to Canberra with BSL for the 50th anniversary of the final report for the Henderson Poverty Inquiry. Now, you spoke so powerfully alongside Federal Minister for Social Services, Tanya Plibersek. Now, Sabina El-Kia, I got that right, where's Zia? From Oxford University, from the senior officials, where you mentioned how it's expensive to be poor. Could you please tell us what you meant by this?
Sure, it does work.
Pretty loud.
When we're living week to week and sometimes day by day, we're stuck in a loop where short-term survival overrides long-term planning, where people are forced to make choices that seem cheaper in the moment but are much more expensive over time. For example, buying in bulk is an affordable way to keep grocery prices down, but we often don't have the funds to be able to do this and resort to buying groceries that have a cheaper overall cost at that time. Things like accessing preventative healthcare. The more we ignore our health needs, the more expensive it gets. This not only has implications for our own health and well-being, but also puts additional burden on our communities and healthcare systems. However, something I only briefly touched on in Canberra was how poverty can isolate people. If we can't afford to attend community events, catch up with friends and family, or even get reliable transport, it's easy to feel left out, not by choice, but by circumstances. Then there's the stigma of being on or having to rely on welfare. And this shame can make people withdraw from community life even when they want to be part of it. And when services don't treat you with dignity or understand lived experiences, it reinforces the sense that you don't belong.
Excellent. Thank you, Jo. Now, second question for you. What does belonging in Australia mean to you, Jo? And what would it mean to feel a true sense of belonging in Seymour, where you live?
Belonging in Australia to me means feeling safe, being seen and treated with respect. It means knowing that my unique identity and my contributions are recognised and valued. In a regional town like Seymour, a true sense of belonging would mean that no one is invisible. You belong regardless of background, income or identity. It would mean that whether you were born here or moved here, you would feel at home because you are welcomed and respected simply for being part of the community. So belonging isn't just a feeling. Belonging is public spaces that invite everyone in. Belonging is local services that don't judge people for struggling. Belonging means making room for everyone, not just the most connected or those with the loudest voices, but also those that are often left out. True belonging in Seymour means a town that lifts people up, not just when they're thriving, but especially when they're struggling. It means recognising that Seymour is stronger with diversity, that we don't need everyone to be the same, we just need everyone to have the opportunity to take part in belonging. Because when people feel they belong, they stay. They contribute, they raise their kids here, they start businesses, they volunteer, they support their community by bringing energy, new ideas and hope.
Excellent. Thank you, Jo. Some really good words there, very well said. Nansi, I'd like to move on to you. Now, we've heard a little bit tonight about the great work that you're doing with the National Youth Employment Body, and it sounds like they're really benefiting from the skills and the knowledge that you bring, particularly how you have the ability to connect with young people, particularly those from a multicultural and migrant background. So now, Nansi, you arrived in Australia 4 years ago from Jordan. Can you tell us what helped you to build really strong social connections in your new home here in Australia?
When I first arrived to Australia from Jordan, everything was different. It looked foreign to me. The language, the culture, the environment. What really helped me to build a strong social connection was to be involved in the community and studying in a field that I'm passionate about. I got connected with the youth service, where I was involved in a lot of activities, and I got to meet people who were just like me. They were new to Australia, from different backgrounds and immigrant backgrounds, and also they wanted to belong to Australia. At that time, I also started my retail job. I got my first ever job here in Australia, and I'm very proud of that. Thank you. I started working at the airport in retail, and I got to meet more and more people from different backgrounds, and that's when I got to learn a lot of different cultures and languages and religions, and I realized that here in Australia, no matter where you are, you just belong. Throughout all this experience, I got to meet a lot of people, and I got to improve my communication skills. And I believe that showing kindness and genuine interest in others helped me improve to help me form friendship, and that really made me feel that Australia is my home. And 4 years into living in Australia, I finally think that I belong here and Australia is my home.
Thank you, Nansi. That's such a powerful and strong story, and thank you. So, Nansi, I'd like to start with you on this question and then go to the other panel members for any additional comments or contributions that they may have. So, how do you think we should help people to feel as though they can be their best selves and truly belong in Australia?
I think to make people feel that they belong to Australia and be their best self is to create a space where everyone can feel respected, heard and seen. I think it's very important to celebrate culture and embrace diversity. And I think there should be mentorships and community programs. Also, there should be cultural celebrities. I think diversity makes everyone bring their own culture, language, food, and I think here in Australia we should encourage everyone to express themselves and to bring their own languages and their own culture here. For me, I believe that if a person is feeling that they're accepted and valued in a community, they will thrive, they will contribute, and they will build stronger communities.
Very well said. I'd like to invite the other panel members if they would like to contribute to that question as well. And it was, how do you think we should help people to feel as though they can be their best selves and truly belong in Australia?
Opportunity. I think opportunities need to be given. Yeah, that's
very good. Michael?
I'm thinking, additionally, giving opportunities is a great thing. However, in order for people to succeed, and we also need to acknowledge and celebrate those achievements. And by doing so, that's sort of contagious. I think that encourages people to want to be even more successful and achieve greater things. So celebrating and acknowledge achievements is great. It's very empowering, and it gives you that sense of belonging, that what you've done has made some contribution, and I think that's free-flowing throughout the people around who acknowledge.
Thank you, Michael. Your Excellency?
Well, I think people will be sick of hearing me say the words I'll say, which is I think we just need to do care, not just think about care. So actively showing up is quite different to a performative act of care. So that's why I talk about care being hard. Welcoming people genuinely is hard if you don't seriously believe in the person that you want to support, where you don't want to... if you always... I think people have said to me often, everyone knows what it feels to be the other. It's hard to actually define what it means to belong, but people will tell you exactly what it feels like to be othered. And I think we've heard that a bit. And whether it's a single mother who's left out of a system where poverty is expensive, or arriving from another place, or having a disability, any of those things, if you are othered, you know you don't really belong, and you're going to have the hardest job of success. And that's what I heard this afternoon at Foundation House, was about building capacity, genuinely building capacity and capability so that people can reach their potential and a sense of success in their lives. That takes a lot more than just good wishes. It's actively showing up and caring. As Auntie Mary Graham, a brilliant Aboriginal philosopher and governance expert in Queensland, says, you don't just talk care or think care, you do it. It's an act. You've got to turn up, and I think we need to show care for those that we have a sense do not feel like they belong and haven't reached their potential. Always with respect and always with kindness.
Thank you, Michael. Your Excellency?
Well, I think people will be sick of hearing me say the words I'll say, which is I think we just need to do care, not just think about care. So
Thank you. Thank you for the contributions. That's very well said and such strong and powerful words. Michael, I'd like to move on to you. So how does the theme of belonging relate to your experience of living with a disability? And what do you think needs to change?
Where do I start? I think belonging, for me, it means different to different people. In this room, you're probably thinking about how that is for you. And I think we all have different answers to that question, William. For me, as a deaf person, belonging, how would I explain this? I think it really means having access. For example, having access to Auslan interpreters, for example, tonight, having live remote captions that are available. In relation to the Governor-General's speak earlier, working with people who care, that really resonated with me. There's an example that I have where I was given the opportunity at BSL, which was a fantastic organisation, and I've been for the organisation for 8 years, and my role is to support 7 people who then, as individuals, they then support 200 community participants under the NDIS. And it made me reflect about BSL give me the care by giving me opportunity that I then pass on to 7 people who then pass that on to hundreds of other people. And I think it's very powerful. So supporting those people in the community starts from one step or one action, and that was spoken about nicely tonight. Belonging for me also makes me want to feel safe. As a deaf person, it's easy, I suppose, to be critical or begrudge, or it's a problem that we need to consider a person who has a disability, in my case deafness, where I've been an inconvenient at times. But you know, I have my partner who's here tonight, my family members, they care for me. It's a great sense of feeling. It's important to me. Also, I think belonging means being proud. I know if we talk about proud or pride, and proud of the country that we live in, but being proud of ourselves too, I think is very important. As a deaf person, as a boy growing up in the world, I wasn't sure where I belonged. Was I a member of the deaf community, or was I a member of the hearing community? And it wasn't until sort of later in my childhood where I met other deaf peers and my life flourished. And it sort of stemmed from being part of a deaf cricket team where I made lots of friends, and my language developed, and they're lifelong friends still. So yes, I'm a proud deaf man now. That's how I identify myself, as proud. I'm deaf, I'm proud of my achievements. And for me, that means what belonging is. Yeah. And William, thank you. And you're asking the question about what needs to change. I'm reflecting on that. The Governor-General spoke about care again. It's something that it's a core value that we have, and we need to continue the care that we pass on to others who, it could be a simple gesture as, how are you going? Are you okay? I'm fortunate that I work at BSL where people care for me. And I've got a really nice story. It was last year, I wanted to share this with everybody. It was the big day out for staff, if people recall that event, and it was at Marvel Stadium. And just before that day, it was hard for the organisation to find interpreters who were available at the event for whatever reason. That was difficult to find available interpreters. So naturally I was disappointed. So I told one of my work colleagues about it, and I said, oh, look, it's a shame I'm not going to be able to attend. There's no interpreters. Look, I'll be able to survive somehow with captioning. And they thought, no way. I'm going to do something about this. So this person then made phone calls through various channels, found Auslan interpreters for me, and the power of that action to ensure that I was included on that big day out, it's left with, you know, it's given me incredible feelings of care and compassion, and it was a very powerful moment. Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you, Michael, and thank you for sharing who you are, and we really appreciate it. So, Michael, something that came through strongly in Her Excellency's speech was how transformative care and support can be when it comes to creating a more just and connected society. Can you share any examples of where someone has either provided you support or for others at BSL, and what was the impact? I know you gave a really good example just then, but if you have any others, that would be great.
I do. Look, I think that the example I'm going to give you is a simple one, but incredibly powerful. So just to illustrate what happens every day, there's training sessions that are taking place in the work office. There's everyday interactions that are happening just in the vicinity of where you are. And I typically have access to all of these. And, you know, someone might mention to me, Michael, we've got a meeting tomorrow. Have you organised the interpreter? And I'm thinking, well, that's not necessarily my responsibility, but the person who's organising or the host of the meeting, that would be their responsibility, organising the interpreters. And so that's sort of the convention that we work through. Now, I just have to turn up. This is the way it works at BSL. I just arrive at the meeting, the interpreters are there, and it's the simple things. Many people might take that for granted, but it's a lovely feeling. It hasn't always been like that. And you know the workspace and the work office, there's a lot of conversations, you know, the water cooler conversations that are happening around the space. And you look up every once in a while from a monitor and there'll be people in the corner having a conversation about anything. And then they might look over to me while I'm looking at them, and then they'll mosey on over to their computer, type something down on the chat feature, and then they'll shoot me a message and say, oh, Michael, just letting you know, mate, that we were talking over there and we're talking about whatever. And I thought, oh, as an FYI, they've just let me know what the water cooler conversation was, you know. And I thought, well, I could have chosen to participate, or I could have thought, okay, thanks for letting me know, but I'll carry on with work. But I had the option to be able to decide whether I wanted to participate or not. And it's the simple things like that that make a difference, and that's BSL for you.
Thank you, Michael. It's really, really strong words, and I just love engaging and talking with you, and I hope to do a lot more of it as we both work at BSL. Now, questions for Your Excellency. What are your reflections on the panellists' contributions tonight?
They're brilliant. Thanks, William. What I hear and see is, I think, the manifestation of what I try to say about what could make Australia a place where people belong and where we exercise all of those values that I spoke about. All of the stories, all of the experiences speak to people going further than the baseline, stepping up and actually considering the life of another person through their experience, not through the privilege of our own experience. That's what I've heard about how easy it is to dismiss or disregard if you don't take an extra step to say, I wonder what this person's life is actually like. So I love the story about BSL with who shows up to look after the interpreters. That says so much about someone else has taken responsibility and not just assume that's your job, Michael. And there's a lot of thought that goes behind that, but a responsibility and care in action as part of the normal working conditions of BSL. Not special, doesn't make Michael feel that he's getting special treatment. It's what he needs to work. And that's the same with working single mothers. You know, the idea that you can do the same hours and turn up without the benefit of a car when you've got to use public transport, or where food is hard, you've got to go to a food bank. Before all of those things, if they're not thinking about these things, they're not thinking about the 4 years it took after you arrived to feel respected and belonging, then we lose out on brilliant people. So if we can turn it inside out and talk about the lack of strategic sense, we're a better country every time we show up and care and actually look into everyone's lives and imagine things from their perspective. That's adding to the success of this country. I think it's a lazy thing to expect that that's everyone else's job or someone else is taking care of it. That's the active stepping up for care. And I just see extraordinary people on this panel who remind me of why I will keep talking about care and respect and kindness and telling those stories wherever I go, because it's only when people get sick of hearing me say it that we will have finally had a penny drop that it really matters. So I'm reflecting on how I might use these stories and retell these stories in a way to encourage all Australians to ensure that everyone on this panel knows and feels that they belong in this country, and not just as a passing moment, but as significant contributors to the success of their lives and our country. And that's what I hear wherever I go. People saying, stop describing us in particular ways and defining us by what's different about us. We want to be contributors, and to do that, other people have to show up and care. So that's it. I've taken a lot out of tonight, though. It's just wonderful to listen to these stories.
Now, okay, we have two more questions for you. So, Your Excellency, as part of your role as Governor-General to the Commonwealth of Australia, you have the privilege of seeing many different Australians from all walks of life. What do they tell you about what it means to belong in Australia?
It's a big question. I'm regularly invited into conversations and experiences in very different circumstances, from the most ceremonial, from the most military to deep community in every sector. And I think what people just tell me is what we've heard on the panel and what we've heard as a definition of wanting to be seen and heard, to have a voice, to feel safe, to be respected. And many talk about the fact that that we have such, they want us to be much more proud. It's a bit like the pride Michael talks about, pride in ourselves and pride in who we are, without thinking that that's an anti-Australian kind of thing, you know, in that tall poppy environment. People want to be celebrated. You know, I see that in the people who are nominated for the Australian Honours Awards. Unlike many other countries, there is no committee that chooses the great and the good. All of the nominations for our civilian awards and our bravery awards are nominated by members of the community. That's how the system works. And so I get to see the people who are nominated by community, and the most telling ones are those who have been the quietest contributors to our success as volunteers, as carers, doing things just because they are genuinely engaged and want to turn up. And when I invest them with the insignia, they all say the same thing. It's not me, it was the team. You know, it's not about me, it's about the community, always, every time. And that's telling me that when we are so much strengthened by a community, it is very rarely about individuals. It's about how we're all connected, the connective tissue of care. And people are proud of that and are proud of their communities and want to share the stories of success. And they ask me to retell those stories and make sure other communities and other people know. They certainly want politicians and people in authority of decision-making to know that they're doing the work, and they expect all of us in public office to behave in a particular way. They want to see a lot more behaviour that is about respect and kindness and sorting things out. They also tell me all the time they're really, really tired of short-termism. I get that wherever I go. You know, please tell people to think of the long term. And I'm hearing that now particularly from a generation of young people who feel and know that if we don't do something significantly in an intergenerational manner, that their lives are significantly compromised compared to the lives certainly that I had. And that intergenerational inequity, I see it and I hear it. And young people are quite clear that that's on us as an older generation, but they want to participate, they want to be part of the success, but they feel that many of us my age have closed those doors and just assume that they'll be okay, and they're not feeling okay. That's one of those critical points, I think, about they want us to care very deeply about the intergenerational equity that we could create in this country, like the work that the NYEB does, that BSL does, that so many people in this room do. It's a really big thing in our country, and I think that's where you get a lot of drifting of young people into the margins and into the corners of the internet and places where protest is the answer because they do not feel that they belong. It's a really big, I think it's one of our things we've got to care deeply about in this country.
Thank you. Final question this evening from one of our people in the crowd, Peter Colbatch. Thank you for the question. So, Your Excellency, what advice would you give to a sports-mad children/grandchildren who are not academically inspired and in one case already has 3 concussions from AFL and want a career?
Oh, goodness. I'd like to hear from the panel as well on this one. So my daughter is an actor. So she's a creative. She has no interest in sport. Nothing I tried to do to encourage her in sport ever worked. She was always going to be a creative, and she was always going to be an actor and a writer. And I think you've got to back your kids' dreams. And if there's a young athlete, I'd keep away from the sport where you get concussion. I'd be thinking about sport as, sport is one of the great lifters of belonging in this country. Whatever sport it is, I'm patron of the Olympics and the Paralympics, and particularly the Paralympics. I think the Paralympics eclipses the Olympics now in terms of belonging and the advocacy that our para-athletes share. As I don't have to be good at sport for you to notice me, but I am good at sport. But you should care about me and what else I do. I think that plays out for anyone who's interested, whatever career. So it's a little boy, did it say? Little boy playing footy, sport?
Sports mad.
Sports mad. There's lots you can do with sport that don't require always getting concussed and playing the game. Sport takes you into development. The work that this country does in the Pacific, there's sports for development. The combination of caring for a community and sport as the carrier of care and community, being part of you can be part of running a club, running a group. Sport, just like the arts, just like every other sector, follow the dream, but find the pathways that help us build a great community.
All right, thank you so much for your words. That concludes our panel, unless anyone else would like to contribute. Nope, no takers. All right, can I please get a round of applause for our amazing panel tonight? All right, so back to you, Trav.
Awesome. What an amazing conversation. I'm sure we'll all bottle it and think about it in different ways and spread it after this evening. So thank you, Will, for moderating it so beautifully. And would you please give the panel a round of applause as they return to their seats? What I'd like to do, apart from thanking the panel, is just to say a little bit about what we've heard tonight, both from Her Excellency and from that incredible panel conversation too. I think what we've heard from Her Excellency and from the panel is about the relationship between care and justice, between care and poverty, between care and belonging, and what all of this might mean as we strive to enrich and to renew our democracy. We've heard lots of stories about what it means to belong and how belonging is strengthened when care is prioritised, when diversity is valued, when people are included, and when poverty is understood and reduced. We heard about care as the invisible heart of our society, our economy and our democracy, something we need to take very seriously and do actively. Most of all, we've heard about how belonging and care help people to feel seen and heard, respected, and to live with dignity. It's fostered when we create communities where people can participate fully, regardless of their background or their circumstances, where we make people, as Joe said, who are invisible, visible, when we celebrate them. And we heard from Michael, from Nansi, from others on the panel about the multiplier effect of that behaviour. We also know that the opposite is true. Belonging is undermined when care is neglected, when experiences of poverty and inequality are ignored or hidden, when diversity is devalued, and when we don't encourage or promote kindness, compassion, and respect across our democracy. Over the past few weeks, I've been really fortunate to visit different parts of Australia for BSL commitments. Certainly not as wide or as far as the Governor-General has been travelling over her first 15 months in the role, but to Gladstone in Queensland and to Derby and Fitzroy Crossing and the broader West Kimberley region in Western Australia. What was Palpable and reinforced on those travels is how valuable and important care and belonging is wherever you are in Australia, from the innermost areas of our cities to our regional and remote communities. And we also know in this room and across the BSL community that many of us have felt great sorrow because of some events at home and abroad over the past few years. These events affect us all quite differently, whether as staff, volunteers, or members of the communities we work alongside. But we've all felt the weight of conflicts, like those in Gaza, in Israel, in the Ukraine, in the Sudan, and elsewhere. We felt the scourge of political violence abroad and uneasiness in times at home, whether that's been because of the recent anti-immigration protests, anti-Semitism, Islamophobia, and the violence we've seen at synagogues, at mosques, and more recently at Camp Sovereignty. BSL stands against racism, discrimination, political violence, and actions that undermine the international rule of law. We stand for care, and we hope that the announcements today are a step towards peace in Gaza and in Israel. Tonight has reminded all of us, I hope, of just how important it is, especially for organisations like BSL, to listen with open hearts, to learn from each other, and to work together to build tolerance and respect. We have a responsibility to build a stronger, more inclusive and cohesive community, one where everybody feels seen, feels heard and valued, where we can accelerate justice and belonging, because we know this will strengthen Australia's social compact and in turn grow trust in our democracy. Her Excellency's very personal and substantial oration tells us just how important elevating care, kindness, respect and compassion is to that endeavour, and how we should be hopeful and optimistic about improving our democracy together, how our democracy is a beacon, can be a more powerful beacon for the rest of the world to follow, for the Mozzies and beyond. That was such a story. I'd like to finish with just a few thank yous. First of all, I too want to thank our principal sponsor tonight, ANZ, not just for sponsoring tonight, but for their long and enduring partnership with BSL and the 21 years of Saver Plus we celebrated last year. Thank you. Our other sponsors, Interactive and Hester, your support is very much appreciated, and it's made the delicious food, the fabulous venue and this awesome company possible. People that have been here in the past have described Sambell Orations as a bit like a wedding where you catch up with friends and partners and family and you get to hopefully have some informal catch-ups once the formalities are over. But thank you for making it possible. There will be other opportunities to do this over the next few weeks and next month, but I do want to pause very briefly and acknowledge the outstanding service that Stephen Newton has given to BSL as our board chair and as a board member. His diligence, his conscientiousness, his devotion and his belief in the team and everything that we do. We've called him our volunteer-in-chief and he's been very much that. He's been a wonderful servant of this organisation. We're very grateful. And we're also equally looking forward, Jane, to Stephen passing the baton to you and what you will do as chair of the organisation. So welcome and thank you, Stephen. Please give Stephen a big round of applause. I'm almost done. To everyone here tonight, thank you for coming. As Stephen said, you're all very special to this organisation. To our supporters, our participants, our staff, volunteers, our partners, thank you for backing BSL and for being part of our organisation. and for all that you do in your respective organisations and the work that your teams do as well. I want to thank my team, the BSL team, who are formidable, especially the team who organised tonight, another outstanding oration. It takes a huge amount of work behind the scenes. They do it effortlessly. And all of the BSL team and our partners for the outstanding work they do every day in communities across the country. Please give them a round of applause. Finally, I want to thank our Governor-General for all that she does in the role, for depicting it in such a contemporary and caring way, this country of ours, and for being our orator tonight. Thank you for prioritising this so early in your time in office, and for your warm encouragement of BSL's work. So with that, enjoy the rest of the evening or the wedding, however you describe it. Thank you for coming, and I'll hand back to Atena and to Matilda.